This is the single Claude Code video you will ever need. Over the last year, I've used Claude Code to build 2 startups and an AI consulting agency. This course will walk you through the entire process from ground zero and requires absolutely no prior technical knowledge. Now, there are 3 things to keep in mind. Traditionally, software developers have costed $200,000 a year just for a junior developer. What Claude allows you to do is have a team of software engineers right on your laptop. And these developers, or agents as we'll call them, enable you to automate any task that you would do on your laptop. Now, the second one, and arguably more important, is letting you do things that you never thought were possible in the first place. For example, if you wanted to reach out to 1,000 people for your business, instead of doing it manually, which would have taken you probably the entire day, you can now do that using agents in the background while you were asleep. Now, the third thing is compounding. The reason you need to get started today is that these agents improve over time. I will teach you how to set up a method to capture all of your context. And by the way, this is exactly what I do. Every single word I say, every single action I take on my computer is captured into a local private database, and my agents learn from them day by day. So if you found this video, that means that you're already someone who cares about building. And that's exactly what Claude Code allows you to do. So let's get into it. Now, by the end of this video, you should have an idea of exactly how to use Claude. You'll have a personal portfolio that you can showcase your expertise and your apps to build. I'll actually show you how to build the apps. I'll show you how to set up routines as well, and you'll have a complete grasp of how to use Claude Code. Now, the very first thing we're going to start off with is actually reframing what AI is and what it enables you to do. Our traditional agents are chatbot based, but how do you think about AI to begin with? And I'll walk you through the installation. I'll walk you through the actual prompts that I use, and everything will be available in a school community down below. I will walk you through the Claude ecosystem and why they are eating up startups every single day. Then I'll teach you how to do prompting and why prompting is much easier. There's no real science other than 2 things that you need to know. MCPs, how do you connect things to Claude? Skills, how do you automate workflows? Anything that's repetitive, how can you hand that off? How do you create subagents? How do you get access to existing open source tools that other developers and other creators are using today? How do you set up version control on GitHub? All of these things so that you can have states of agents that are being tracked over time so you can ensure that you're not losing any data. Then building out an actual app, building out actual skills. How do you build these yourselves so you don't have to rely upon other people? And then advanced tips and tricks that I use in my day-to-day, and then philosophy as a whole. The first thing we need to learn is the difference between a traditional ChatGPT-esque chatbot and an agent. A chatbot will answer questions for you, and it lives in a single tab. It generates text that you might copy paste somewhere else. It's a step above generic Google search. And an agent has access to tools. So what does that mean? It can take actions on your behalf and by itself. For example, it can read your files, it can edit them, it can plug into your browser, into any piece of software really that you would use today and take actions there the same way that you would. And that shift is the entire reason why this video even exists. I will walk you through this diagrammatically so you can get a better understanding, but we want to start with how LLMs work. So this is, you can think about ChatGPT, right? This was what was released in 2024, where you go onto a website and you're doing a simple chat search, right? You're asking it a question like, let's say, how do I solve XYZ problem, right? And then it gives you an answer. And then you can ask it, what about this, when relating to the problem itself? And then it has this particular answer and this particular question in memory, and it can respond on that basis, right? That's our general introduction to what an LLM is. And in the backend, what is ChatGPT doing? ChatGPT is a prediction machine. So it's predicting what the next most likely token will be. And essentially when models come out and they get better, what they're doing is they're getting better at making the prediction. So the next prediction is more accurate with respect to the context that it has. Now, what are tokens? We are going to be talking a lot about tokens, and I'll throw that word around, but tokens you can think of as synonymous to being a word. So this here is a token, this is a token, this is a token. So you can think about these as 3 tokens. And the reason why this is important is we move on to our next topic, which is 2 things you need to know about AI models. The first thing is the context window. So a context window is just the amount of memory that an agent can hold at once. And the reason why this is important is because if you have ever spoke to ChatGPT, you'll realize that after a while, it starts to forget the things that you told it before. And the reason for that is there's a finite amount of information that it can hold in its memory at once. So if we were to think about this as the entirety of your chat, right? You talk to it, it responds to you, and so on and so forth, right? You message it. There's a finite amount of tokens that a model can keep in memory, and typically that has been 256,000 tokens. That's what most models have. But today we're starting to being introduced to 1 million token context windows. So that means that it can store more information. But one thing that we need to keep in mind with LLMs is if you were to plot a graph where this is the accuracy, this is the time, and this is the accuracy. And when I'm talking about accuracy, I just mean the reasoning capabilities of the model. It degrades over time, and maybe a better way to put this, time/tokens. So the more tokens you have, this is 250K tokens. As you get to 500K and further, the accuracy of the models decrease. And so a lot of our jobs is to keep our context windows short and give it and feed it the precise information that it needs. Note that 1 million tokens is a lot of information, more than some novels actually. Now, the second thing that we need to know is knowledge cutoff. So what is knowledge cutoff? Knowledge cutoff is simply the date at which the model was trained, and so it only has information up to a certain point. So it's the date up to which the model has specific information, and that's very easy to search up. You can simply go to Google and search for the knowledge cutoff of any model. So right now, today, we're going to be working with Opus 4.7, so I can simply say Opus 4.7 knowledge cutoff, and if we look here, it says reliable knowledge cutoff is January 2026. So after January 2026, if we talk to Opus, it's not going to know about any events that occurred after 2026 January. If there's any coding libraries, if there's any new information that's happened, any world events that have transpired, its knowledge cutoff is before that time. And so if we are working on the cutting edge, then a lot of times our solution to this is to pass in relevant context. What does that look like? That means doing web searches and telling your model to search things up. What happens once you hit the limit of 1 million tokens? So once our bucket here gets full, right? If it's full of conversations, we've hit the entirety of whatever our token limit is. What happens after that? So what used to happen traditionally is models would simply get rid of the last message, right? Up here, it would just get rid of the last message and then continue on. Get rid of this message and continue on. But nowadays, that's not what happens. What we do now is we take the million context window, we take this entire set of messages and we summarize it. The model will summarize it into approximately, let's say 100,000 tokens for simplicity. And then when you start, as you send in your next message, it will take this and feed it up at the top, the 100,000 tokens. And then now you have 900,000 tokens to continue talking with it. And then it just continues from there on out. You can fill it up. And then again, it will take this entire context and then summarize that further. So that's how compaction works. This process is called compaction. And oftentimes it will happen naturally in Claude Code, for example, as we will get into it, but we really never want to hit auto compaction here because of this accuracy degradation that happens as we fill up the context window. Okay, so the next thing is actually the tools that we need in order to get started. The very first thing we will require is Claude Desktop. So you can simply search up Claude Desktop and download this if you're on Mac or for Windows. That's the first piece of software that we'll require. So the second thing is going to be a speech-to-text piece of software. Personally, I use VoiceInk. It's open source, completely free. The only downside is that it's only available on Mac as far as I'm aware. So you might have to go with Super Whisper or WhisperFlow as mentioned here. I'll leave the links for everything down below, but essentially what this allows you to do, as you'll see, is I can press a button and I can just speak and it will automatically transcribe my voice, so I no longer have to spend time typing. So first things first, once you open Claude Code, you'll be greeted with the chat section. You want to navigate over to the code section, and this is where we will live. This is the primary interface, and what you'll notice is it's the exact same thing as ChatGPT, as all the chatbots that you're already used to. That's the power, is the interface is exactly the same. It's not this entirely new interface that you have to learn. You are talking to it in chat the same way. The only difference is now it has access to your file system. It has access to tools, which I will explain how they work. But tools, in a nutshell, are just access to certain systems. So the same way you can edit a file, you can update a file. Instead of you having to manually do that, now an LLM can go in and take those actions on your behalf. A couple of things to set up. First is I will recommend to at least be on the Pro plan. I believe you actually need to be on the Pro plan to even download this. The second thing is if you go into settings and you go under privacy, you want to toggle the help improve Claude and the location metadata off by default, so it's not training on any of your data. And we will get into the rest of the Claude ecosystem further down the line. Don't worry about any of that, but this is your primary interface here. I am on the max plan, by the way. I use the 20x max plan, but I do a lot of coding. Let's familiarize ourselves with this interface to begin with. The first thing that I want to draw your attention to is the models themselves. So when you click on the models here, you can take a look at two sections. First is the models themselves and then the effort. The way to visualize this is Opus 4.7 is your most powerful model. It takes the most time to answer a question. It's also the most expensive. So anything that you're doing that requires a lot of thought, a lot of reasoning, you want to default to Opus 4.7. And you can see the 1M here means the amount of tokens in its context window that it's able to hold. The rest of the models here, you have an Opus 4.7 option, which only has, if I'm not mistaken, 250,000 tokens. So this is what I use by default. I generally use it around high or extra high, but this will burn through tokens quite fast. Your second is Sonnet. Sonnet is a step down from Opus in terms of reasoning. It's still very powerful, don't get me wrong, it's faster, but again, a step down. It's much more cost efficient. So if you're on a pro tier, I would recommend using Sonnet for most of your work. And then Haiku is the lowest tier. It's extremely fast, it's extremely low cost, but again, you are then paying in terms of the reasoning capabilities of the model. Now the effort here, again, very intuitive. Low effort just means it's not putting as much reasoning power into it. It's also the cheapest amount. And so it really, as you use them, you'll understand based on the task itself how good the models are. It takes a little bit of experimentation based on your specific workflows, but generally I use Opus 4.7 on high or extra high. Other thing I want to draw your attention to is permissions. So permissions are a little bit important. As you start to work with it, you tend to just give it complete permissions, and that's what I do. But that's because I've set up my systems in a way so that Claude does not have access to particular secrets and environment variables and passwords. I'll show you how to do that in a bit, but you want to start off with accept edits. That's perfectly fine. We'll get into plan mode, which is really crucial, and that allows Claude to first plan before we actually execute. Now, the second thing is your actual file and folder structure. So here you can see I'm currently in a repository called Bavi. I'm going to switch over to a Claude Code course, or for this sake, let me create a new one. I'll call it Claude Code Course 2. Let's do that. You can create a new folder here. Now you can see I'm in a new folder. That's odd. It should have automatically just opened that. Okay, there we go. Okay, so yeah, this is simply giving it access to another folder as context. Honestly though, it will by default have that. There's an option to do stuff in the cloud, but I would say that's more advanced, and for now, don't worry about that. Now, what I want to do is switch over and actually get our first prompt. So our first prompt is going to be about building a personal portfolio, and we are going to use Claude Code to do this. Now, before we start anything, what we want to do is use plan mode. So what plan mode essentially allows you to do is before you write any code at all, it allows it to plan it out. And that drastically improves the accuracy and the efficiency of Claude, because it's not spending time trying to do things and then you go into it and you're like, oh wait, that's not how I wanted it at all. Change this, change that, change that. Essentially what you want to do is spend, I'd say 90% of your time in planning and reviewing, and only 10% actually executing and writing code. That I found is the best split between the two, and that's how you maximize accuracy. Okay, so let's send this out. Let's trust the workspace. Now, while this is running, One more thing I wanted to draw your attention to was file and folder structure. So you can think about our folders as a project. So right now we are in the Claude Code course folder. Inside of here, we will have our files, and whenever you are working on another project, all you want to do is just go in and create another folder, and you can call it XYZ project, right? And the reason why I'm introducing this is because of the concept of Claude.md files, and this is where the personalization really kicks in. So what Claude has done has created a Claude.md file. What does this Claude.md file do? It allows you to start personalizing. Claude.md is, when you see this MD, all MD is you can just think about it as a particular format. Is this text the same way you'd have a docs, right? For a Word document, you have docs. It's the same thing, but just Markdown is better for AI agents to understand. And every single folder will have a Claude.md. So this has a Claude.md, this has a Claude.md, right? Everyone has a Claude.md file. Now these are what we will refer to as local Claude.md files. Okay, let me move this. These are your local Claude.md files right here. And the reason why this is important is every single time you start a new session in Claude Desktop, you will be passing in this Claude.md file. And the Claude.md file, essentially, it tells you the specific things that it should know. And that's what you're storing in there. As you can see in this example, if you have a Claude.md, it's passed in every single time as context in a new conversation. So whenever you start a new session in that folder, it's going to pull that Claude.md and add it as context. So whenever you start a new chat, let's say we're in the Claude Code course, now this Claude.md here is loaded by default. Claude.md is loaded by default every single time as context. So you don't have to continually remind it of certain things. Now, let's actually see this in action here. Okay, so what name and tagline? Okay, for now, let's just use placeholders. But if we had a Claude.md here where we put in our name, then it wouldn't be asking that. What should I do? What do I do? Let's just say coding, learning, and building. For now, we want it to be amber and orange. Field should the contact form have? So need a name, email, and message. Okay. If we were to start a new session now in the Claude Code course, the first thing that you will want to do is actually run a / command, /init. And what it does is it will initialize a new Claude.md file with code-based documentation. And there are a couple of things that you want to pass in to this Claude.md file. The first thing is who you are. So your role, company, what you spend time on, the current projects, what you're building, how you like your answers. For example, if I want M dashes, I don't want M dashes. If there's a certain design styles that you would like in your repository, if there's certain constraints you want to avoid, certain things about yourself you don't want it to tell it, etc., you can tell it that. This repository is for a personal portfolio website that I want to build. Ensure that you're not using any M dashes anywhere, and we are using only SVG icons instead of emojis. I also like ShadCN as my UI library. Okay. And with this, it will remember this going forward. So any subsequent session that I have, it will pass this in as context to our agent. Awesome. Now, one of the neat features of Claude Desktop is you can actually open these side by side. And now that we've done this, you can see I've answered it. I can simply say accept and allow edits. That's where the permissions comes in. So you can see here, it's just created a plan file. Now you can click on the plan file and it should actually allow you to open it up on the side. And you can actually read it and see, okay, what is the plan that it's come up with, right? And we want to skim through this. Obviously, one file, the working directory root, design system, it's black, surface. Okay, we can't really see what that will look like, but we will be able to. Page structure, we'll have a header, we'll have a hero. Awesome, what I do, accessibility and polish, files, verification. So this is good. It seems that it's actually already built it here, and you can see that it's shown up right here. So this is what it looks like. So we already have a personal portfolio right here. That takes in name, email, message, what I do, perfect. Okay, so let's close this. And which framework should I build the portfolio website on? For now, let's say Next.js. We can do NPM, Lucy React. Don't worry if you don't know what any of this means, by the way, because one of the really great parts about using AI is when you're unsure of anything, you can simply ask AI what any of these things mean. So let me close this off on the left-hand side, open this here so you can see it in a bigger view. And it will happen on the left-hand side. It will create the Claude.md file for us. Now, there are two sets of permissions that we have. We have local permissions that live within each repository, and then we have global permissions. So global permissions are across all your projects. What are things that you want across all of your projects, right? How should Claude behave? Are there certain things that you don't want it to do at a global level across all projects? That's what would live in this Claude.md file. And the way to do that is to simply, let's say, start in a new session and say, hey, Claude, what is in my global Claude.md file? And what are best practices for setting this up? A couple of things that I will mention as best practices. In your global Claude.md file, you really want to keep those 4 things that I mentioned. So number 1 is who you are. So if you have, for example, a LinkedIn profile, or if you have any resumes, these are great things to just throw into Claude and give it as context and tell it to extract information, right? LinkedIn or resumes. The second thing is, what are you building? So in my case, this would be, I'm working on Bavlio, Bavimail, and SapienX. Who am I? In this case, I would actually say I'm a founder, right? You want to give it, you can give it geographical information, you can give it information about your age, but all of this is so that you can personalize it and you don't have to repeatedly tell Claude this information as you go forward. Now, what I will do is I will give you a prompt in the description below, which will contain a file that you can simply feed over to Claude, and Claude will then walk you through and ask you all of these questions so that you can have a personalized markdown file. The third thing is the actual length of this. You want it to be ideally under 500 words. And then preferences. Preferences. So all of us have idiosyncrasies, and they can be, you have a specific type of color scheme that you really like. You like the color yellow a lot and you want that design system to flow through. You maybe want it to always ask you certain things, and that's something that I will recommend. Perhaps you want to explain what level you are technically so it can help you with understanding a lot of these things. You can tell it to act as a teacher, you can tell it to act as a life coach, whatever, depending on what you have. That's the tonality that you can instill into Claude yourself. Okay, let's now switch back to Claude, and we can see here that this is my personal Claude.md file, identity and behavior. So decide, verify, and ask things as a senior engineer, debugging order, code and output discipline, right? Git and branching. I'll explain what GitHub is. This is absolutely crucial if you're building anything long-term. Our planning workflow. This is the exact steps that I use in order to write code that has no bugs. I'll walk you through that. The tools that I have, and then best practices, it mentions it right here as well. And you can see this is something you want to do routinely. And the reason is because it's now telling me things that I have within the Claude file that is redundant and that is probably better kept in the local files, right? But sometimes I work very cross repository, so not all of my work for a folder is within a single folder. And because of that, I like to keep a lot more information in my Claude.md. But again, I also use the 1 million token model for that very reason. I burn through a ton of tokens. Now, the second thing that we want to get onto is the actual memory.md file. So if we go here, we will be able to now see that, first of all, it's created a Claude.md file. So this is the Claude.md file it's created for this specific repository. So now every single time you start a new session, this file will be passed in as context, and it will know this. You don't need to know any of these things, right? But instead of it asking you these things again, it will simply have this in its memory. Okay. Can you add to memory not to ever use M dashes again? And can you explain what a memory.md file is? Okay, now there are two things. So Claude.md is a static file in the sense that you set it up and then you have to proactively manage it. The second thing that is passed in is a memory.md file. So there are two. Now, memory.md is what Claude actually remembers, and it will be updated proactively. You can see here, recall 2 memories and save 2 memories. What that means is it will first see if any of these memory files exist here. It doesn't, so it created a memory.md file and it added the rule into it. So there are really rules here that exist, applies everywhere, including chat replies, never use M dashes. And these are things that Claude is programmed to automatically add in once in a while, although you can explicitly tell it to remember something going forward. So we now want to get into a couple of commands and actually really delve into how we can manage Claude effectively. So when we start a new session right here, the first thing we can run is /context. Now, as I explained before, what is context? Context is simply the amount of tokens that are currently within that model. So if we run /context, so if you remember when we do compaction, for example, all of that context is now summarized into from a million into 100,000 and passed in as context. You can see by default, there are things that are passed in, even though we've had nothing before, but already there's 53,000 tokens. And we can see what the breakdown is here. So there's MCP tools, which are taking up 22,000 tokens for me. There's system prompts. So this is from Claude's side themselves. And then you can see we have memory files here. So that memory file that we just created is passed in. The Claude.md is also a part of this that's passed in. Custom agents, messages, all of these things, and then we have 91% of free space. And so this is something that we want to proactively keep track of. The main reason being you can end up with a very, very overfilled context window. So I remember at one point my context window was filled up to 50% with just tools and calls. And as a result, I would type in one message and after that, it would just fill up the entire window. It'd have to compact and compact and compact. And I didn't understand what was going on. But you want to be proactive and measure so that you're not adding bloat to all of these systems. You really want to keep your context window under that 5% mark, 5 to 7%, I'd say maximum, as you're going about it. Now, the second thing that we want to keep track of is our usage. If you are within the CLI, so if you're using the command line interface, then you can type /usage there. And you will actually get a session usage as well. So the way that Claude Code works is it buckets it up into sessions of 5 hours. And you have multiple limits. You have a session limit, which resets every 5 hours. And then you have a weekly limit, which resets every week. You can see here, there's also a Claude Design. We will get into that in a bit, but you can monitor this and you can see if you are overspending, then you might have to move your models down. So if you're using, let's say, extra high Claude Opus 4.7, you're going to run out of these session limits very fast. And so you have to be a bit conservative and you have to keep an eye out on how much your usage is. So mine have just reset, thankfully. So I have a lot of limits remaining for the rest of the week and for this session as well. The next thing is you do have certain options here in terms of the verbosity of the actual output. I would not worry about it too much. Just keep it at normal. You could have it verbose if you want to see every single message that is responding with. So if we were to move this verbose, then you can see all of a sudden now all of this is visible to you, but I would highly not recommend this because it's just more stuff that you have to scroll through. You can do thinking. Thinking is generally good, but even normal is basically thinking. You can see the actual thought process of the model. I just leave it at normal. Okay, now we want to get into the nitty-gritties of actually thinking about building something. The way that we want to go about building is initially a 3-step process. The 3-step process is planning, working, and then reviewing. Those are the 3 steps. And the way to do that is, first of all, you put it into plan mode as we did before. Claude will ask you certain questions. You can say what you want, what your options are, how you want to guide it. You do that. The second is then it actually executes the approved plan. And then finally, we get into the review mode where you will have to explicitly tell it to review whatever you've done. And the way to do that is to set up a sub-agent to review things. I will show you how to do that. There's also a built-in review command. So if you do /review, then it will analyze the difference and run off a review agent. And I will highly recommend you to do this. The biggest issue with models is they have a particular thought process and they are very biased in terms of the thought process. For example, now that this particular agent has written the code in a specific way. If I was to just ask this agent to do a review on the code it's written, it would really agree with what it has done because it already has the thinking laid out, right? It has all of the answers that we gave it laid out. So it's biased towards that way. And so it will be very hard for that particular session or that particular agent, you can think about it as an agent, to be able to find mistakes in its own thinking. Whereas if you were to spin up another agent, now it's able to come from a relatively unbiased perspective. Obviously, the models themselves innately have a limit to their reasoning and thinking, but regardless, they're more unbiased and you're able to come up with more nuanced bugs within your code. And that's generally good to have, especially when you're building out larger systems. Can you do a review on the code? Do we have any reviewer subagents? Actually, could you set up a reviewer subagent for us such that we can invoke it after we write any piece of code? Now, the next thing that I really wanted to get into is how do you write prompts? How do you write good prompts? So prompting really has two factors to it. The first factor is detail. How much information are you providing it? And then the second is volume. The more you talk to the model, the better you get at understanding the sort of context that you need to provide it. Because as I mentioned at the start, there's really one thing that we're doing when we're talking to a model, and that's providing it the right context. All of the work that we are going to be doing, all of the efficiencies when we work through skills, when we work through MCPs, when we work through all these connectors, it's just ways to give the model the right context. So I'd say it's all about context, right? You really need to drill this in, and the more context, the more specificity you can provide the model. Not only is it going to be more efficient because it doesn't have to go out and make assumptions, but it's also going to be much faster because, again, it doesn't have to go out and do the reasoning upon it because you're already telling it and directing it to exactly what it needs to do. So coming back to the reviewer agent, you can see that I already have reviewer agents under the compound engineering repository, and there's a bunch of them. So I have multiple sub-agents. I have one for security, one for performance, one for simplicity, one for architecture. I will get into the plugin that I have that I use and the plugin marketplace in a little bit, but this is some more advanced stuff if you're actually building out a product that I'll get into a more advanced tutorial. Awesome. So you can see, again, it didn't really find anything here. It said a review of this. It created a code reviewer agent right here. We can just tell it. And now all subagents are they're just markdown files with a particular format. So you can see there are 5 things really, well, I'd say 4 things that make it up. The first is the name, right? It needs to know what the name is. The second is the description, right? So what is it actually being used for? The tools that it has access to. So grep is just, you can think about it as a way to search across files on your device. Bash is interacting with your terminal. Read it, again, is very intuitive. You're just reading files. The model, you can define this here. So subagents are really good because you can, depending on the task that you want to automate, you can define the intelligence level. So right now we don't want to use Opus because that is expensive for us to do. Right? And then you can see that it automatically writes out this prompt for us here in the review agent. And a lot of this is security, correctness, getting bugs, because of course here our specific portfolio.html is very bare bones. There's not much in here. You can actually take a look at the specific code itself. If you go into file here, then you can see that there's not much here. It's just bare bones HTML. We have a tiny script here. So there's not much in terms of efficiency you can get, but you can imagine as your code base grows or as the amount of things you're doing grows, then inefficiencies are bound to arise, and having reviewers that run proactively are very important. Okay, so now we've gone over how to personalize using the Claude.md and using a memory.md file. How do you prompt well? So how do you ensure that you're giving it the right context? The next thing, which is extremely important, is how do you actually connect things? How do you get Google to be connected? How do you connect, let's say, your Gmail account, your calendar, your apps that you're using on a day-to-day basis, right? How do you get these as context for Claude? And the way that we do that is we simply click on settings, go to connectors, and right here you can see I already have things connected. So I have Xcode. Don't worry about what that is. It's just for building Mac apps. GitHub, we'll get into that in a second. But Gmail, Google Drive, these are things that I've connected. And if you're not, you can just click on connect. It will take you to a page, and then you can choose whatever account you need and connect that. And now every subsequent time you ask Claude to do something, it now has access to this particular app. So now that I've connected this, I can actually go back to Claude and ask it, hey Claude, I've just given you access to my Google Calendar. Can we build in an integration on our personal website that pulls from the Google Calendar and surfaces times that I would be available to meet? So again, this is the power of connectors, because now instead of me having to specify things, it can simply pull information from my Google Calendar and feed that information in. But what we want to understand really now is APIs, because APIs live at the core of connecting things together. So we need to understand what APIs are. And bear with me, I know this is getting a little bit technical, but once you have this horizontal layer of foundational knowledge, building anything on top of it is really, really easy, I promise. So APIs stand for an application programming interface. And the way to think about this is it's simply a way for you to pass data between different services. What does that mean? For example, when you open your phone and you see weather, the weather app is not actually keeping the data on your phone, right? It's pulling it from some server, and the way it pulls it is via an API. It uses an API to fetch that data onto your phone. When you're listening to Spotify, for example, it's doing the exact same thing. It's just pulling information from a particular database and feeding that information to you. Now, the same way, when you open, let's say Google Calendar, and you open it on any device, you can see your specific events, you can see your schedule. How is that happening? Google actually uses APIs, as everyone does. Everyone uses an API. Google has their own API through which the front end is just what you see on your device, is calling an API, right? So a front end, you can think about this as front end. This is what we see. The front end calls, we use the word calls, the back end. So let's say via an API, and we say this is an API request. Okay, so this is our back end. And for now, we'll just put a database into our back end, but this is, and you can think about this very simplistically as where data lives. Really what actually happens is there's a separate database here, and then the backend will actually route to the database, and the database will get information back, and then it will feed it to the front end as a API response. So there's two parts to a API. There's a request and a response. Anyways, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but very easy ways to see information. And if you are someone who likes to scrape data, for example, you can scrape data quite easily as well off of certain websites by simply checking this information here, the API responses that you're getting. What are MCPs? MCPs essentially is what you can think about MCPs as connectors for LLMs, right? Or for chatbots, for agents. What MCPs essentially allow you to do is they allow you to connect services to your agents. And MCPs are built on top of APIs. And it essentially explains to the agent what that API request does, right? What is this? What is it responsible for? Now in Claude Desktop, one of the MCPs that are really nice, that I use often, is the Chrome DevTools MCP. And that essentially allows you to give Claude access to a browser and take actions on your behalf. And installing MCPs is extremely simple. You can simply go to Google and type up, let's say, Chrome DevTools MCP. And right here, you will see Chrome DevTools MCP. Okay, let's go to their actual GitHub here. All you have to do is simply copy the link, give this to Claude. Let's start a new session. And you can see here, by the way, that portfolio now it was able to pull times that I'm free over the next 2 weeks and populate the chats right here. So again, this is the power of connectors, which are just MCPs. And let's say we wanted to add in, can you add this MCP? That's all you have to ask, and then it will go ahead and add that for you. It really is as simple as that. Now, if you want to take a look at all the possible MCPs that you can add, you can go to Claude Code, MCPs. And right here, you'll have a variety, a huge list of MCPs that you can connect to. One nice MCP is the Context 7 MCP. And essentially Context 7 allows us to get up-to-date docs for LLMs and AI code editors. As I explained before, there's a knowledge cutoff window. And because of that, oftentimes agents do not have the necessary up-to-date documentation for certain services, and they end up writing buggy code. So if we wanted to add this, I would copy it. I would open my terminal, and then I would simply paste this, press enter. Boom, now it has access to this MCP server, and there we go. You can see that it ran a command as well. It ran the exact same thing. Install it, and the way it did it is, again, it just wrote that add Chrome DevTools MCP. This was added, and now what can I tell it? If I was to go into /MCP, press enter, then you can see here all of the other MCPs that are offered by Claude as well, right? We also have plugins that we will get into a second, but what MCPs do you have access to? You could also use the /context command to take a look at this and see how much space that the MCPs are actually taking. So now if I wanted to use /context, again, you can see that all of a sudden we've jumped from 5% at 52,800 to 6%, 58,000. And that's because our MCP tools should have increased, deferred 2.3%. And you can see here deferred is 1.6%. So we have increased that quite a bit. And you can see here, we can actually list out the specific MCP tools themselves. So these are all the tools that it has access to. These are all the things that it can do on our behalf. Now, you can see right here, these are the MCP tools that we have, it has access to. And let's actually walk through some of these. So using the Chrome DevTools command, can you actually browse through our application? Or you know what, let's do something a little bit more fun. Can you use the Chrome DevTools MCP to go on our calendar and add in a event for tomorrow? One of the things that Chrome DevTools MCP is really helpful for is if you want to do any front-end testing. So for example, if you've just created a website and there's multiple pages and you wanted to go ahead and browse through and take a look and ensure that all your features are working correctly, it's quite useful for that. Okay, let's do a quick test event here. And then it will go off and do this in the background, but we can even take a look at how it works. So you can see that it will use a tool search. It found the right tool. Do you want it to create an event? Let's do always allow. There we go. And now we can click on the link, and we can see that it just created this test event from Claude. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. But you can see now that is how you add interactions with it. This is connectors. Connectors are extremely, extremely powerful. Some of the things that I use personally on a day-to-day, you can see I have connected here. Chrome DevTools MCP. Honestly, Chrome DevTools, I have it bundled up as a skill, and I'll get into why skills are actually more powerful. The real way that I want you to think about MCPs is what is possible, what are the things that I can connect, but when we actually go about connecting them, we want to use skills, and we'll dive into skills in a second, but sequential thinking is there, Codex High. So Codex High, unfortunately, I don't think we can bundle it up as a skill, but I subscribe to both Claude Code Max and Codex Pro, so I spend a lot of money a month, but I've bundled up Codex Extra High as an MCP server that runs whenever I write any code to review it, to help plan as well, to ensure that I get the highest accuracy, that I catch any bugs as needed. Now, I'm also connected to my Google Drive, my calendar, my Gmail, etc., just so that I can have a routine that runs. And now we'll get into routines in a second, but first I want to get into skills and how we can set up skills, because skills are extremely important, and most of my MCPs live as skills. Just to reiterate, MCPs are what can you connect, and then we get into skills. Skills are the actual implementation of, let's say, MCPs, but really what they are is skills. Skills live both locally and globally. So you can have a skill.md here, you can have a skill.md here. So you can have local skills, and you could also have, let's say, your global repository. You can have a skill.md here as well. And so these are global skills. The same way you can have a global Claude.md file. You can have global skills as well. And skills really enable you to automate any action that you do more than once. That is the framework that we use. So this again is saved on disk and it's invoked by saying a slash command. So if you remember, whenever I typed slash here in my chat session, you can see all of these skills that I have access to. And oftentimes you won't even have to type the specific skill because Claude, every single time it loads, has access to all of these skills, right? As I mentioned, it's passed in as context every single time you have a session. So for example, you can see when you hover on it, I want to read, write, and manage Airtable. So I use Airtable for a lot of my video content creation stuff. So let's say Airtable, can you use this skill? You know what, let's actually not even invoke it. Can you use the Airtable skill to add a new event about filming a Claude Code demo on YouTube? Make sure that you add in a brief summary of the video as well, where we will be creating a demo of MCPs, of skills, of plugins, and of building a personal portfolio. And what you will see now is it's going to invoke the actual Airtable skill. So you can see it says running skill, allow Claude to run the Airtable. Let's say always allow. And there we go. It can pass in certain arguments here, and I will open it once it runs it, so you can actually take a look at what that looks like in real time. And this is the power, because what Claude Code enables you to do is have a singular interface for a lot of your services. So now I don't have to go and open Airtable. I don't have to go and open Google Chrome and go to Calendar or open my Gmail account separately or go to all these separate platforms. Instead, I can have everything feed into a single hub, which is Claude Code, and access everything through there. There we go, record ID. And now I know that this is there. Can you actually give me the link so I can navigate to this page? And it will be able to do this. Now, okay, let me open this. And there we go. You can see right here. Sorry, it is this one right here. So Claude Code demo on YouTube. I have a walkthrough of it. There we go. It's posted right here. So that allows you to add things in and pull things as well. So if you wanted to, now let's say you have dates every single day for things that you do. This is when you would set up routines, and routines are what allow you to run agents asynchronously on particular schedule on a routine, right? That's why they're called routines. But before we get into that, I wanted to first show you how to actually create a skill. Can you explain what skills are and how to create skills? So let's actually ask let's actually ask Claude how to do this. But one thing you need to know, and you will see me doing this as we're walking through this, oftentimes the best explanation for things can be found by AI itself. You can just ask it things that you want to do, and all of a sudden it will explain what they are. So you can think about it right here. What is it? Skill is a markdown procedure that Claude follows. Now you should know what markdown is. It's loaded when you invoke name or its description matches. You can have subagents, you can have MCP servers, and you can see there are personal skills, you have project skills. You can also have skills in a plugin, so we'll get into plugins in a minute, but these are essentially your personal skills. You can think about as global, as them being accessible across all of your projects. And these are specific project only skills, as we mentioned before, and how to create one. Okay, so first things first, you pick a folder. So where do you want this skill to live? If there's a particular skill that you only do within a particular project, then you'd want that skill to live there. What I've found is most of my skills, if not all of them, are global. Just the nature of how I do things. I want to have access to these automations across the board. Then you can write a skill.md file. Again, when it says you have to write it, you just tell it to create a skill and it will go ahead and do that. And again, this is an example, weekly update. Use the skill when the user asks for a weekly status update. Reads recent Git commits across all Bavlio repos. Awesome. Let's go ahead and actually see if we have the weekly update skill. We don't. So can you go ahead and create the weekly update skill as you've mentioned above? However, in addition to reading my Git, can you also take a look at my calendar and add information from there and add into that the meetings that I have? So I can get an overview of both code and my general schedule. Perfect, we'll blast that off. Now, one more way, if you don't for some reason want to do it this way, you can actually click the customize button on the left. You can go into skills, and right here you have a skill creator. Is actually a skill that Claude natively gives Claude Code access to, and this is the actual skill creator skill that it invokes to create more skills. And you can read it, it's very neat. You can actually take a look at the markdown file. So this is what markdown looks like. When you render it, this is what it looks like. You can see the anatomy of a skill. So the way that skills are actually set up is you have a high level skill.md, right? So the skill.md is what's passed in by default. So the way that an agent works, let me move over here. In skills, let's do skills. You have a base description, right, that skills have access to. It has every single time you start a new session, the skill's name and its description. Those two things are passed into the agent. It's not the entirety of the skill.md that's passed in. So that's one thing to know. The name and the description of the skill are what get passed in every single time you start a new conversation or a new session. Now, the name and description essentially entail what the skill does, right? And now the skill itself is actually bundled up as a folder. So for example, let's say we have, and you're going to see, we have a skill for our weekly digest. The weekly digest is going to be a folder. So this is an actual folder, right? So this is our folder. Inside of the folder, there's going to be a skill.md with the name, with the description, with other information that I might need. But whenever we now invoke the weekly digest, or the weekly digest itself will be passed in, the name and the description will be passed into a new session. And then whenever we invoke it, the first thing that will get read is the actual skill.md file. Now, the important thing is it's not just the skill.md file that's passed in. You can have other folders inside of this folder, right? So let's say we have a GitHub folder, and this GitHub folder then has, I don't know, we have other markdowns in here in terms of branches.md or code.md, so specific things that you want to take a look at. You could have separate other folders. Let's say we want a schedule folder, and then here we outline, take a look at my Gmail, you take a look at my calendar, etc. And then we can add in logic to the skill.md to say, hey, you want to actually look at both my GitHub and my schedule folder, right? So you can really see that the possibilities here are endless in a sense. You can add in logic to these as well. You can add in logic to your skill.md. So in the case that this is what you see, let's say in my GitHub, then take a look at the corresponding stuff in my branches. So in my calendar. For example, let's say I was writing some code and I pushed that to GitHub. So GitHub is where all of our code lives on the web. You can just think of code on the web. Let's say I just pushing just means you are taking the code from your local device or the files and then pushing it, as in putting it on the cloud. We've just done that. And then the skill, the weekly digest runs, and it takes a look at my calendar. It sees that there's empty time slots, and I can just tell within the skill, if you find times where I've committed code, but there's no corresponding session or bucket in my calendar, then bucket that as an event of writing code, right? It just creates an event where I was writing code. That's what I was doing. So now my calendar is up to date with what I was doing. I can always go back in time and take a look at it. Now I wanted to take you back to the actual skill that we had created here. It seems that it's still building it now. The first thing that it did is take a look at our existing skills. And okay, I'll be back once it's done. Now you can see that the actual skill was created, and we can click on it and simply take a look at what this looks like. You can see that we have a name, we have a description, right? Use the skill when the user asks for a weekly status update, weekly retro, what did I ship this week, Monday morning brief, etc., etc. Weekly update. You can see one more thing, sorry, just to note, is this skill is a global skill. It's not a repository specific, so it's not within the Claude Code course folder. This is at a user level, and then it outlines what it does. So compute the windows. It will find out the time. It will pull my Git activity. So this is just all my coding activity. It will pull my calendar activity, and then it will synthesize the information. It will give it to me in a particular output. You can always play around with these and fine tune them. That's really what you want to do with skills that you're using often. And one of the easiest ways to do that is once you see the output, you just tell it what you expect it to be. So you can just tell it, oh, I don't want this, or, oh, can you add this to the skill? Now, if you wanted to take a look at other things, I'm not sure if it actually added another file here. Yes, it didn't. So you can see there's just a singular skill.md. It's not necessary always that other files will live in here, but let me see if there's something I can find that would have multiple. Yes, so the content writer skill is a skill that I have, and this skill is what I use to output a lot of content. Let's say I'm doing outreach on Reddit. The content writer skill will actually find me relevant posts on, let's say, Reddit, and it automatically learns my voice, right? I have voice examples in here, and all of these things can live within this particular skill, and the skill itself will outline description. If you want to draft content for Reddit X, blah, 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 these are the allowed tools. The user cannot copy paste, always include links, right? I want it to always give me links so that I can click on it and quickly navigate to the page. It shouldn't fabricate URLs. Read before every draft. Again, if this is this specific skill, I will add into the link in the description. Very, very useful. In fact, I can show you exactly how it works. Hey, Claude, could you invoke the content writer skill to create comments on LinkedIn? Or let's do Reddit. Reddit. And you will now see it work through the exact process that it takes. It will read, because here I've specified that it needs to read the references, right? Reddit specific references. You can see that I've told it the actual workflow that needs to be ran here. And all of these things, this is actually my first time even reading the skill.md. I've never read the skill.md file because I don't need to. I can just take a look at what the output is. Is it working the way that I intended it to work? And as long as it is, then we're Gucci, we're chilling. Awesome. So reading this, you can see now it's reading my context, it's reading the voices, it's essentially following all of this. But the important thing is not all of this was passed in as context. It's only now being passed in as context. And so it's not cluttering it. And then you can really think about this, that your job here is that of a CEO. Let me give you an analogy as to how you want to think about yourself with all of the skills that you have access to. You here are the CEO, right? So you are the CEO of the company, or of whatever you're doing. You think about yourself from an organizational perspective. So you are the CEO. Now, what is the job of the CEO? The CEO's job is to manage the company, right? Now, the company in this case is whatever it is that you're doing, whatever your responsibilities are. It could be one startup that you're running, it could be multiple things. Maybe you are a go-to-market engineer, and so you're the CEO of go-to-market in a sense, right? And the reason why you want to have this framing in mind is because the way you set up skills, the way you set up these subagents is that of a company. So for example, you might want to have a weekly finance digest. And the way that you get this is this comes to you via a /CFO skill. And this skill, essentially, let's say you have access to your bank statements that you're pulling in. Again, if you are comfortable doing that, you could pass that in. You could pass in expenses. You could pass in, you could ask it to do some financial analysis. You can ask it to do all of these things, and every single week it sends you an email saying, hey, this is our expenses over the past week, this is what our trajectory is, this is what our burn rate is, etc., etc. You could have a, let's say we have a /CMO skill, right? Or a marketing skill, the same way that I have the content writer skill, and its responsibility is now to get you marketing material, right? So weekly marketing material or daily marketing material. And then again, in here, it could be you scrape Instagram, right? You scrape X. Take a look at my competitors, right? You read competitor websites. You can ask it to then generate assets and save them in a folder. Generate assets and save in folders, so you can simply copy paste them, right? In fact, you can even make the posting process automated using another skill, or even built into the skill itself. All you have to do is simply review it. So you can really see the power that you have using skills, because you start thinking about yourself as the center, and then all of these things, all of these skills as employees. That's the mindset that you want to have. You can have a CTO in here, which goes over all of the things that you did. I'll give you particular examples of stuff that I do. I have a Bavy skill. Bavy, I think about it as my personal Jarvis. And I have a my Bavy skill. Essentially what Bavy does for me is every single day, even this recording, I have 3 monitors. My 3 monitors are recorded continuously. Everything I say is recorded continuously, and it's fed into a personal database that I have. And that database contains all of the speech, all of the text across every single minute that I do work, that I'm sitting at my desk. And what that allows me to do is essentially track every minute of my life. And Bavy, now I can use that context engine, and I would highly recommend setting up a context engine like this yourself. A little too technical to get into how to setting that up in this tutorial. I will add that into our next advanced Claude Code video. But it's able to take all of this context in for me and then give me suggestions and tell me improvements. I can ask it. I have an articulation skill, for example, so it will read the transcripts. It will take a look at how fast I was speaking. It will take a look at my filler words and tell me, hey, you were using a ton of filler words here, or you could have improved your speech there. The possibilities are genuinely endless, and it's just up to your creativity and how self-motivated you are to improve and try out these different things. Okay, let's come back to this skill that we have just created now. So you can see that it read 17 files, read all of these posts. it's saved. I tell it to save everything to a drafts file, so I can click on the drafts file and it should open it up. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I can click on it. There you go. For some reason, yeah, my cursor's been weird. But you can see now the way that I've set it up is it will go ahead and find all posts within the last 6 hours that have less than 15 comments, so they're relatively fresh. It will read the post to first confirm the context, and then we can post manually. So built to SaaS, not worried, B2B. And you can see this language does not sound like typical AI because it's been trained on my voice. The way that I set this up first is I asked it to give me suggestions. Then I fine-tune the suggestions, and then within the skill itself, it's built in to read my examples and see the changes. So what I ended up posting, what it suggested versus what I posted, and then to refine its copy next time for when it gives me suggestions. So all I have to do now is hit copy on this, click on this page, see if it makes sense. Obviously, I'd read through this first, change whatever needs to be modified, if it needs to be modified, and simply post it. And this saves me a ton of time. I've built up a lot of karma doing this. And because it's trained on my information, so Claude has access to my LinkedIn profile, it has access to by the businesses that I run, it has access to my education, has access to all of the things that I'm doing, has access to all of this context. The actual suggestions are very, very personal. You can see right here, it knows that I use Claude Code Max, it knows that I use Codex Pro, right? It knows these things about me. So because of that, it can really personalize it. Right? I sent 100,000 plus cold emails, and what are the things that I've learned from that? Because that's what I do using Bavlio and Bavimail, the services that I've created. All of these things, you can see it knows that I've been using it for 8+ months. And that's the power of saving all of this information, is you now don't have to spend time explaining it and re-explaining it over and over again. You set up the workflow and then it does the work for you. So I hope that gives you a pretty good understanding of what skills are, how to set them up, and just how powerful they can be. The next thing I want to get into is how do you automate them to run by themselves? And this is where an OpenClaw-esque setup comes in. So if you've heard of OpenClaw essentially allows you to run certain jobs asynchronously. In the sense that it allows you to run jobs at a particular time in the background. And that's where routines come into play. So if I go into routines here, you can see that I have a couple of routines set up. One is a news watch that happens every single day at 7 a.m. I have an inbox prep that happens if I click on, let's say, news watch. Then you can see that you're running the news watch, blah, blah, blah. You send via Bavimail. But essentially, it just takes all of this information and then it sends me some stuff. And you can click on it to take a look at what the run was, if it worked or not, if it completed, and you can set these up. You don't even really have to set them up manually. You can simply go to Claude and tell it to can you set up a schedule to do this yourself every single day and notify me once it's done. And this way you can just tell it and it will use the routines to notify you every single day to do this. And you will see once it finishes just how powerful this truly is. Okay, so we want to do this every day at, let's say, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry, 9 a.m. Eastern time. We can even tell it something else. Let's stick to 9 a.m. It should be delivered. Let's say you can email it to me. How many drafts per run? 5 drafts, 3 drafts. Let's do 5. And it will set this up for me. Again, everything is as simple as just telling it what to do, and then it will go ahead and create this over for yourself. It will run the schedule skill. It has a skill already built in to schedule it for you. Now, one caveat, which might be patched by the time you're watching this, is that the skills here are broken down into 2 components. There is a remote skill and there's local skills. So remote skills run on Claude's cloud. They run on Claude servers and they don't have access to your local machine, unfortunately. So in the prompt itself, you have to give it access to all of your API keys. However, you can set up local routines as well. So you can see here, there's 2 options. There's local and remote. So if we wanted to set up a local thing, let's say we wanted let's do a morning prep. So we want a morning prep skill, morning prep, right? And the description is that it's a daily personal context briefing. Every single day, it gives me that description. And then I can just run this as a prompt. And then we can schedule this, let's say 9 a.m. We want to select a folder if we want to do that, sure. And then we can hit create. And now it's created. Morning prep is created. We can run it now to see how it works. We can click on it. And then we can see exactly the prompt that I pasted in. Don't worry, I'll give you access to this prompt as well. So you can simply copy paste it in as needed, but we can always switch back to this. How do you want to schedule this? So you can see that there's no skill files in the Cloud Sandbox. So the remote agent doesn't have access to this, unfortunately. And so we would actually have to probably do it locally on this Mac. So there are still a little bit of things that are being fine-tuned, but again, you can just run your Mac always on. That's what I do. I always have it on, and I run daily updates for content. So my content writing skill is actually something that runs anyways, and it just sends me a message via Telegram, and it runs in the background. But again, you can set this up simply using Claude Code and routines as it gets more and more hashed out. Now, the next thing that we wanted to touch upon was some of the skills that I run every single day. As I mentioned, I already showed you the content writing skill. The other ones are SEO research and Google Search Console. So these are both part of the same SEO GEO. I have an agent for that. Again, when I say agent, really it's just a bundle of skills that live together. And the way that you bundle skills together is plugins. Plugins are bundles of skills, agents, and commands. And the way that we think about this is some of the skills that I showed you before, for example, the CFO skill or the CMO, you can see that it has multiple functionalities, and then it might make sense for you to actually bundle this up as a plugin. So plugins you can think of as bundles of skills, agents, etc. Right? That's what they allow you to do. For example, a very popular plugin is the GStack plugin. And this was created by Gary Tan, who is the CEO, I think president of Y Combinator. And it's very nice. It's something that I use, or I've taken certain things out of it myself, and essentially it gives you access to a QA agent, a design agent, and a shipping toolkit. You can always search for it as needed, but you can even find plugins in the plugin store within Claude Code. And so the way to do that is if you go into customize and you click on personal. You can see here I have some plugins. So this is a plugin that I've made myself. For some reason, it's not rendering here properly, but you can browse plugins. Let's see if we can actually find GStack. Okay, we don't have a GStack skill, unfortunately. Oh, these are only supported by Anthropic, but let's say we wanted a PDF viewer skill. We can view this to see exactly what it does. Markup contracts, fill forms of visual feedback, stamp approvals, link in browser. Okay, so maybe this is not working, but we can simply search up, for example, GStack plugin. And here, if you don't want to read it, you can see all of the specific skills that it has, right? It has a chief security officer, it has a design consultant, it has an upgrades, like all of these things that are built in is very, very powerful. And if you're just starting out, I would highly recommend this. This GStack skill as itself will give you a huge advantage over a lot of other people. I'm pretty sure there's also a video out on it that Gary made, but very easy. All you have to do is, as it says, just copy this, install GStack. You can honestly even just tell it to install GStack for you, and it will go ahead and do that. I use Compound Engineering, and Compound Engineering is based off of Kieran Klassen. He's an incredible engineer, and he uses Claude Code often as well, and he's published Compound Engineering. And this is more if you're actually building apps and you're actually engineering and you're building SaaS products, then this is something that will help you build at scale and build stuff robustly. However, again, I would recommend, if that's not you, then just stick with the GStack plugin to begin with. It's immensely powerful, and we can work through that as well. You can see the sessions. Okay, allow. Okay. So you can see now that it's created this when you'll get each morning. Perfect. So this is going to be created, and then it's going to create a draft in my email account as well. You can even test it to see, ensure that it works. Can you install the GStack plugin? And one way that I love to keep up to date with all of these new plugins and skills that come around is you can simply go to X, and you can see every day there's a new Claude update, but you can simply ask Grok. You can ask it, what new skills or plugins have come up for Claude Code within the last month or so? You ask it, and then it will go ahead. And the good thing about X, as opposed to any other LLM, is it's trained real time on X data, and it has access to searching X data. And most of the very smart people, Andrei Karpathy is one of the OGs of AI, He also publishes often on here. Everyone just lives essentially, you can see Sam Altman's here. You're not going to find them on other platforms. You're going to find them on X. And so XAI has that native advantage. And you can ask it to give you that information. Let's ask it now. Ask it to install the GStack plugin. I think we already should have it installed, but it will just give that a check. Now, I wanted to touch on the plugin that I use the most to actually build apps, and I will briefly touch on it if you actually want to build any software and works well. It's called the Compound Engineering plugin. I'll leave everything in the description below, but essentially the way it works is it's broken up into 6 steps. We have the brainstorm, which is essentially you're framing the problem, like what are we doing? What is this about? Research is actually figuring out, you can think of deep research online. So what existing tools are out there? What about our current stack? Where are we at in terms of what our current knowledge is, what our code base is, what is our intended solution? All of that gets hashed out with brainstorm and research. And then we have a plan loop. So now this is actually agents working in a loop, multiple agents working in a loop to figure out the best way to plan this out architecturally, from a security perspective, from a durability perspective, from a scalability perspective. Perhaps this is something that you just want for yourself. So maybe you don't have to go that in depth with the security. But if it is something that you plan on publishing, that you do want to run through the security extensively, then of course comes the work. And this is the actual coding part of it. But then after that, we run reviews, and then we compound. Compound engineering gets its name from the compound step, which is essentially after every piece of work that is done, you ask the agent to remember key parts of it. So the same way we have a memory.md file that updates in real time as you work, as it learns your preferences, Compound does that, but for a particular project that you're working on. It could be technical specifications, it could be architectural documents in terms of how your architecture is laid out. Like you have services here, they're hosted on AWS, you have your database is Supabase, you have these things. These are the particular idiosyncrasies of your code base or your project. All of that gets saved within the compounding step, and then it's a loop. It's an iterative process which really allows you to build code that's durable and sustainable. And you can see, as I alluded to before, but our work is just a single step. So the actual work part is just one part of the multi-step problem. Can you check if we already have GStack installed? Oh, so you can see, right, it already is installed here. So you can see we already have GStack installed, and that's why they're already all available. They're part of it. So let's leave it, nothing to do here. But again, it's that simple. You can just ask it to install the GStack plugin, and then it will do a search on the web. You can also just give it access to that. And I found that that's a very, very useful plugin to have. The next massive piece of the puzzle is understanding how to track changes over time, and how do you share this with your team if you're working in one? How do you keep track of all the different projects that you have at the state of the projects? If you were building some websites, where do you host them? How do you keep track of the websites? How do you keep track of changes over time? Because remember, context for these agents, it lives within a particular session, but not all of that can be distilled into markdown files, right? That's simply not possible. The specific code changes need to be tracked somewhere, and that is where we get introduced to GitHub. So the way to think about GitHub is version control. So it tracks changes across code. And the reason why it's immensely powerful is because every single thing that we're doing is code. Every markdown file is code. Every front end that we build, every website that we build, every skill.md that we build, every single thing is code. And you want to track changes across them, and that's where GitHub comes in. So if you don't already have an account, then you can simply head to github.com and create an account. This is what github.com looks like. You can create an account. If you're working in a team, I would highly recommend to create an organization. You can see I have organization for Bavlio, for Sapien X. We keep all of our stuff in here. And in that, you can create a repository. So a repository is just a folder, right? A repository is simply a folder that you have. So for example, I have a Bavi folder on my local machine, and so I just push that repository up. The way that GitHub works is we have a couple of core functionalities in GitHub. The first thing is you want to think of repositories. Everything is saved as repositories, and so the hierarchy is organization. Again, if you're individual, then you don't have to worry about this, but if you're working in a team, then I would say create an organization first. An organization has many repositories, right? There's multiple repositories. An organization has many repositories. A repository has many folders and files. And again, remember, a repository is nothing but a parent folder, right? It's a specific folder that contains a bunch more folders and files. So the same way you have documents on your Mac, right? Or on Windows. You have a documents folder where you have a bunch of other files and stuff listed. The same way you have a repository, the same way that I created a folder here called Claude Code Course 2 is essentially we can push that to GitHub, and that's actually what I'm going to do right now. Once you connect to GitHub, there are two things that you want to do. The first thing is ask it to actually install a GitHub CLI on your machine. And all that is it gives Claude Code access to GitHub. Again, you can just ask it, hey Claude, can you connect to GitHub CLI and let me know if there's any authentication that you need to do? Right, so this is the first command that you would run. And then the second thing you would say is, hey Claude, can you push this repository under my personal account to GitHub? Already connected, so yeah, I'm already connected, so I don't need any authentication, but let's push this repository. Now, there are a couple of things, couple of words that you need to be familiar with in terms of how GitHub works. So now that you have this, you have a couple of actions. So let's get into GitHub actions. Actions. So as in, i.e., what can you do, right? What can you do on GitHub? The first thing is committing and pushing. So all this means, a commit and pushing is just saving changes. That's all that is. Committing and pushing is just saving changes. Commit specifically is done locally. So you're just saving changes locally. You're batching up changes and you're saving them locally. Pushing actually means to push it on the cloud. So this is on cloud or on GitHub, essentially, is what you're doing. The second thing that you need to know is branches. So how does GitHub work? How does version control work? You have your initial state. So think about states. So states is just what your code looks like right now. So right now, for example, I have a personal portfolio, right, that has, let's say, a single landing page. A personal portfolio with one landing page. With one page, which is the landing page, that's what I meant to say. But anyways, so that's our current state. Let's say as I work on this, tomorrow, so think about this in terms of time. Tomorrow, so this is today. Tomorrow, I make some changes, and now I add in a second page on website. All of a sudden, in order for me to add in 2 pages, what does this mean? This means that I have made code changes. The only way for me to add another page is if the actual underlying code has changed. And what GitHub allows you to do is when I first initially create this today and I push the changes, right? I tell Claude to push the changes to GitHub. It will create a repository, which is a folder online. It will take my current code within the folder and just put it online. That's all it does. And now whenever I make changes using Claude Code, then tomorrow I can come back and say, push the changes again. And now when I go to GitHub, I can then actually take a look and see the changes that I had between days. So let's say I want to go back to a previous state. There were certain changes that I made and I'm not happy with the changes. I want to go back in time. Then Claude will have access to this. It can actually take a look and understand how our code base has evolved over time. And this is extremely powerful to have. If you can simply just understand these 2 things, it will significantly increase your efficiency. Now, the third thing, this here, I said branches, but this is also under commits as well. Yeah, so let's put this under commits as well. The second thing, as I wanted to say, which was branches, the way that branches work is, let's say we have code today. This is our current state, right? Current state. Let's say now I want to try out different features. I want to try out 2 different versions of the landing page, right? I want to change one to orange and one to blue and see what they look like. What I would do is I would create a branch. So this is our current state. Let's say I could even create 2 branches. So one of them would be this would be blue and this would be orange. Okay, I have these 2 branches. And now these branches are just different states of the code, but you can push both of these branches onto GitHub yourself. And then you can pull. So pulling is the action of taking changes from the cloud and pulling them locally, because locally you can only have one branch. Well, you can have multiple using GitHub Worktrees, but we will put that aside. So for now, just think about the fact that you can have a single version. You can have either blue or you could have either orange locally, but you want to switch between them quickly. So first you pull blue, right? First you have blue, you pull. Again, when I say any of these words, when I say pull, push, you can just tell Claude and it will explain it to you more in depth, and it will also know what these terms actually mean. So you can simply pull blue in, see what it is, pull orange in, see how it is, see whichever one you like, and then comes merging. So merging is simply bringing it back into your main state. So let's say this is our main state. Now let's say there's certain things from orange that you like, you merge it back in, and then you go ahead with blue, and there's, let's say, a component that you like from blue, so you can then merge that in as well. And so now this is your main, this is your, this here, let's say, is your main branch, right? Your main branch. Your main branch state can now have changes from blue and from orange, and the process of getting them in here is what we call merging. Very easy way to visualize this. Oftentimes these branches are called feature branches, right? So we will call both of these would be feature branches. And so a diagram for this would be something like this. So you have your main branch, right? You branch off of it after you make some changes, you make changes onto your feature branch, and then you merge it back. One of the use cases, of course, here is to have and try out different features. But the second thing is oftentimes when we deploy, let's say you've just deployed a website, what you're deploying generally is your main. However, you now want to make changes and you want to try out different things. So what do? You create a feature branch, and now you play around with changes there, and then you merge it back into main. So then those changes can get pushed and deployed onto your website. I think that should get us set up for the next about, but you can see here that I asked Claude to push this repository under my personal account to GitHub. And here it asked me for the name, so I gave it the name. Should I make it public or private? So it's public. You can actually probably go ahead and take a look at it. I might change the name up to just Claude Code course. However, it's done, and I can click on the link, and you can see it had a single file and has been pushed. It's online. This is the link to it. Again, everything will be in the description below, but you can see now, even the Claude.md file that we created earlier, now this is online. So let's work through this. Can you create a branch where we can try out a different color scheme? I want to make it brown and yellow. While this happens, two more things that we really want to get into in terms of front end and understanding how to actually develop and deploy websites on scale, at least the front end version of it. We want to first get this running locally. So you can see here that now it's pulled this up, the HTML file. This is what it looks like. It did a palette swap. You see that it created a branch. It made a commit, right? So it pushed these changes to origin. When it says pushing to origin here, you can just think of as pushing to GitHub. And now if I go back here, you can see this feat just means feature, a feature branch. The feature branch's name was yellow, right? If I click on one branch here, then you can see we have a main branch, then we have a feature branch, and I can click on it, and it will tell me what changes this has. But if you click on, compare and pull requests, then you can actually see the specific changes that we have right here on GitHub. So we changed the colors here. That was the main change, right? That was the only change that we wanted to make. And then a pull request is essentially, we're making a request to pull the changes from this branch into the main branch, right? You can see this is the base. We're merging the changes in from the branch that we've just created into the main branch. And so a lot of what I will work on, a lot of the review step actually happens whenever I make changes during my workflow in the compound engineering methodology. It's laid out in there. So again, you can ask Claude for this. But what it will do is run reviews on this difference. So it will take a look at this very difference, the coding agent will, and then it will look at it from a security lens. It will look at it from an architectural lens, from a simplicity lens. All of these agents will run, and it will see if it makes sense to then merge back into main. And it will give me a pass or a fail. It will loop. That's what the compound engineering methodology is all about. So let's create a pull request here. Again, we can do all of this via Claude, and then we can merge it. We merge this, and then you can see that we can delete this branch if need be, but it's merged, and now our main branch will actually contain the yellow and brown scheme. You can see now we're on our main branch, and now it contains these changes. So this is extremely powerful. Now, in terms of actually looking at the front end and creating good front end websites, this is where the magic comes in, because you can see this looks extremely basic, right? You can create this and it's still not bad. It has some animations in it. I used a component library. Component library is just what these things look like. So they're front-end libraries, they're design systems, design styles. The one that I default to because it's nice and everyone uses it is called shadcn. Right? There's a lot of different types. These are components that come pre-made and very easy to feed them into Claude Code, right? There are other ones, popular ones that exist. You can use Tailwind. Okay, so let's get into building real apps now. The first thing that we want to do is define a folder structure. And for that, I will ask you to set it up in a manner where you have your documents folder. Within documents, you'll have let me show you here how I have it. So documents, inside of documents, I have a GitHub, and inside of GitHub, I have all of my repositories here. And you can ask Claude to set it up in this manner because it really, really helps with standardization of anything that you're working on. You do not want your one repository to be in your documents and maybe it's instead of this level, it's all the way here. You don't want that to be the case. And something's in downloads or something's in desktop. You want everything to be laid out well. And the way that I do it is I have a singular GitHub folder. And because I push everything to GitHub, because you should be pushing everything to GitHub, everything there will then, every single project lives right here. Just an FYI before we get started. Okay, the next thing is, what are the specific libraries that you can use? 21st.dev is absolutely amazing. There are a YC-backed startup, and they contain some really good components here. You can browse around, and let's say we wanted to add in certain, let's say featured best of the week. What are some of the best of the week features? So this looks nice. We can simply copy the prompt, paste it, add the above to our website, say enter, and now all of this, you see it already uses shadcn because that's very typical, but it's going to take all this code that was required to build it, and now it should implement it, and then we'll be able to see it in a second. So 21st.dev, extremely powerful. This is one aspect of it, but you can see we have, if we want to do announcements, if we want to do backgrounds, right? All of these things can be built out using 21st.dev. So if you actually go to my personal website, which is .com, and you go click on Explore Constellation, then you see I've used this exact thing, the spiral animation right here. And even this effect I copied over from 21st.dev. So that being said, there's a lot of things that exist on 21st.dev, a really nice place to get started. If you are on the max plan, then you can also go to claude.ai/design. And Claude Design will allow you to start creating design systems. So design systems are extremely important. You can see here I have a Bavlio design system, I have a Bavimail design system, and these contain the exact spacings, the exact coloring, the exact types, the exact fonts that I use on Bavlio. And the reason why this is extremely important is now this can be used as a reference point for any marketing material that I'm doing, any further changes that I want to make, any content that I'm putting out can be styled using these components. And if I want to make any updates as well, because I have a component library and a design system that I'm using that I've custom made, I can simply make changes to buttons as a whole. Let's say I wanted to change up the color for this. I can copy this design system, put it into Claude Code and tell it, hey, I want to change this orange to be red. And now across the board, every single button will be changed to red. So these are extremely powerful things to do. And also creating a design system, I'd say, is extremely important. But even if you just want to brainstorm, Claude Design is quite powerful. Now, one thing that I have done, if you notice the slides that I've created, they were made using Claude Code, Claude Design as well. However, Claude Design only supports up to 15 slides or 14 slides. So these are the old version of the slides that I had created. However, what you can do is actually click on share. You download this as HTML, and then you go into design files, you download the rest of this file and the CSS file. You download all these files, you give it Claude Code access to it, And then Claude Code can understand how the HTML is rendering the presentation, and it can create it for itself. Again, I'll give you the prompt as to exactly how to do that in the step-by-step guide to doing that in the description below. But that's how now the slides that I have, around 80 or 90 slides, and I'm not limited by Claude Design because Claude Design has very stringent rate limiting on plans. So one thing to keep in mind, the next really good tool to use is Google Stitch. Google Stitch is really good to just design things on the fly. If you wanted to design, for example, again, I can show you my landing page here. This is how I went about iterating and thinking, hey, okay, maybe we can try out a tree, maybe we can try out something along these lines. You can change the models, you can design components, etc. Really good for that. Another thing I would say is in Google Nano Banana is really good for specific images that you'd want to generate. And so I use this often whenever I want to generate images for clients, or if I want to put specific graphics anywhere. Again, even if you take a look at my personal website, if I show you this right here, this Silver Surfer and the Thinker pose was created via Google Nano Banana, and then you just ask it to not add any background. And let me see if I can actually pull that up in my stuff here. Yes, there you go. So you can see this is the exact same thing. You just run it through a background remover and boom, you have a perfect asset that you are now working with. So let's see if this is done. Okay, it's still working. In the meantime, okay, so it's still working. So we can keep that working. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was how do you debug and actually take a look at this. So this might look a little scary to begin with, but you can right click on inspect or F12, and this is how you can actually see what your website will look like. You can try out different aspect ratios. So if I click on this right here, you can see what it will look like on a phone. So you can select a different phone, let's say iPhone 14 Pro Max. This is what it looks like. I don't want to have the constellation on a mobile phone, and so I don't have that, but you can switch between and toggle views depending on the type of website that you're building. Maybe more people access it on phones, maybe they don't. And the good thing is you can do this, but you can also just tell Claude to make your website responsive, right? If you have any particular website that you really like the design of, sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to, Sequoia, our companies, these companies, if you filter here, I first partnered, let's say early, let's go to all, and then you do the latest. So these are the latest companies that they've partnered with, right? You click on them. These guys usually have some really nice websites. You can see these are really clean websites, and you wanted to take something from here. What you can do is copy paste the link, or you can even right click, inspect, and copy the HTML and paste that. Awesome, so this is done. To refresh this page. Okay, it seems that it's not working. We can simply screenshot it. This is what I see in my browser. Okay, so it seems that it just didn't run it, so maybe we have to run this now. Okay, it seems that it did. Let's go back and refresh this. Even though I ran the npm run dev command. And so this is just part and parcel of working with it. It will go out and debug it, and then I can even tell it, can you ensure that you, after you make changes, that you're actually verifying that the changes have been made using the Frontend validate command? And so the Frontend validate command is a command that I have that will actually verify everything that's on the front end. Okay, so we're back. It says that the server is up. Let's refresh this page, and there we go. Now we have this Prisma style inside of our own website as well. Again, that's just to show that you can copy paste these effects into your own website, and then you can always tailor them to add in your own information, change up the text, change up the fonts, etc., the design style to your needs. One thing to note is the gstack command itself will have a front-end validate skill, but you can also have a design consultation, right? You can run all of these skills, and all of these skills are essentially there to make your life super easy as a first-time founder. Okay, so this is the website that it has created. However, this is bare bones, and we'd have to do some customization to it. Let's say I don't really like it. I'll stop it, and I'll say, I don't really like what it looks like. Can we just deploy what was on the main branch to begin with? Unless you've made these changes to the main branch itself, or switch to the main branch and let's just deploy that. Note that my name is Adam, so you can update that in the website, and then let's deploy this via Vercel. So Vercel is what you can use to deploy. Vercel lives at Vercel.com. And if you go to Vercel.com, it's extremely easy. You can give Claude access to Vercel, and you can ask it, hey Claude, how can I set up Vercel CLI? One thing that you will have to learn is what API keys are, because API keys essentially are what allow you to authenticate with any platform. So any platform will contain API keys, and they will be able to deploy. So you can see all these websites that I've deployed via Vercel, and I'm going to deploy this website as well. My name is Adam. You can update that and deploy this via Vercel. So a little bit more about architecture here. How does deployment work? So we have a front end, right? You remember this, the front end. That is what we will be deploying, right? We're deploying the front end, and we are deploying using Vercel. So we're deploying using Vercel. And what Vercel does is it takes this front end and then it will host it. So hosting is simply putting it up on a particular URL, right? It takes whatever we've just created, and now at, let's say, myurl.com, it will host it at this URL. So now whenever someone goes to myurl.com, they see that particular front end. Now, the thing with the front end is you don't have any logic behind it. There's no login system. All of these things are stuff that you can actually build into the website, but that is for a more advanced course. You can already get started with creating websites. So a lot of businesses, even in today's day and age, do not have personal websites, and you can now build websites at scale and actually reach out to them at scale as well using Bavlio's API, and find their emails, reach out to them in your local businesses. You can scrape Google Maps, you can create Google Maps scrapers and reach out to them and tell them, hey, I can build out websites for you. And in fact, what you can do is you can create a skill called Website Builder, and that skill will essentially build out websites for every single person. And you can now create websites for them, tailor make them to that specific person, and attach that URL, that Vercel URL that you generate in the email that you're sending out to them, and now they can already see something that you've generated. Okay, so if you remember, I told you a little bit before that you can only have single branch at a time locally. However, that's not really the case because of what we have called Worktrees. Worktrees allow you to have multiple versions or multiple branches of your repository locally at the same time. So it essentially allows multiple branches locally. Remember, a repository has many folders and files, but it also has many, let's put it here, it also has many branches, right? You saw me create the feature branches, so repository also has many branches. So Worktrees, essentially multiple branches locally, and oftentimes if you're iterating locally, instead of pushing and pulling continually, what you can just do is ask Claude to work using Worktrees. And this is something that I've actually added into my global Claude.md itself. You can add this particular line. It makes your life much easier. It's essentially what it does is it just creates an additional folder using that branch name. So if we have let's say we have an orange branch, and that's our default branch. If we have another branch, then we'll just call it, or whatever our repository name is, dash, let's say blue. And now we have two versions of it that can be accessed in real time by agents. And both of them can be changed and modified in real time instead of you having to pull and push them separately. Okay, let's get into some advanced tips and tricks now. Okay, so you can actually use Claude Code on your phone. And the way to do that is if you have a mobile phone, you can simply navigate to Code. And if you have sessions open on your laptop, then you can simply connect to those sessions, and no matter where you are, you can start actions on there. Another big aspect is subagents. So subagents is when instead of a single Claude working on a particular problem, you have multiple instances of Claude. So you can think of task, right? So this is your task. Instead of you delegating this task to a particular agent or one session, you now delegate this to multiple agents, right? That's what you're doing. And the way that this looks like in practice is whatever your agent is, let's say you're talking to your agent, right? You're talking to Claude, and then what Claude will do is it will then spawn off multiple sub-agents, and each of these agents can have separate responsibilities. And you will see that that's the case in any of the plugins that I have. All the separate skills are launched in parallel as agents with different contexts. And so what that allows you to do is allows you to, not only can you specify the particular models that you want to run with these agents, you can also specify the description and the context that you're passing into it. And you can run them in parallel, especially if you want to take a look at, let's say you want to do a front-end audit. You want to take a look at the security. You want to take a look at the architecture. You can do that. Or let's say you're doing research, right? So you have another research. The way that it would work was you could have let's say a frontier research. So this takes a look at everything that's happened within the last 2 months. You could have another agent which looks at a particular angle within this. You can have another agent which then ties in all of that information into your existing repository, right? It sees what you have right now and tries to come up with things. You can have another agent that plays devil's advocate. So you can have all of these agents working for you simultaneously in parallel, and it really improves the quality of the output. Now, of course, what you have to keep in mind is the more agents you spawn, the higher your usage will be. And so you have to be mindful of spawning these agents. And one way to keep track of this and to not have to worry about it too much is to just use Sonnet sub-agents. And so I'll do that for some of my tasks. Okay, it seems that Vercel is back. So Claude Code course 2 was deployed, and boom. Now anyone can go to the web, go to this particular URL, and we are at the website. We have this deployed. If I go to Vercel, which I would never have to, this is the first time I've even taken a look at this dashboard, but you can see it's already deployed. Now, there would be a one-time setup for you to actually connect Vercel to Claude Code. You can see that it ran a check for Vercel CLI. And so this will be something that you'll have to install. But again, you can just tell Claude to install Vercel CLI. You can tell Claude to install any of these things, any of these tools that you're regularly working with, to check if the connections even exist. And so Vercel, you can see it already exists. It connected it, perfect. It connected to GitHub. It posted everything to GitHub. And so now version control is taken care of. It's connected to Vercel. So now that's taken care of. In fact, you can even connect it to Porkbun. So I use Porkbun to buy domains, and it's connected to that. I have a skill to buy and automatically warm up domains if I'm doing any outreach, and connected to Bavemail to create aliases, and then connected to Bavlio to actually send out campaigns. So all of this is done via the CLI, so I don't actually have to go and navigate to different websites or web pages. So I hope you're understanding the magnitude of what is really possible here. Let's come back to what subagents will allow us to do. Can you deploy a couple of subagents to do research on the frontier of what personal websites look like? You can use the workflows research command. So the reason why I said workflows research is because my compound engineering library is set up as a workflows research. That's just what the command is called. And so you will see now it invoking that skill by itself and then deploying multiple subagents to go out and do their own research in parallel. So we can tie this concept that we have back to what we were doing. And so you can see here, what it's done is it's just spawned agents in the background. And you can even take a look at the particular context that it's giving to the agent, right? Research the cutting edge of frontier personal websites, blah, blah, blah. Focus your research on whatever this is, design trends that are winning. And then you have another agent. So you can see there's 2 agents here that are actually running simultaneously, and they're running in parallel. And so you get much more information than you would have normally, because you can tackle different parts of a code. And the way that this works is not all of the context that the agents come up with. So let's say you're Claude, and in this particular example, we have a frontier research agent, right? We have frontier research, and we have a best practices. What will happen is each of these agents have their own chat, as you saw. Right, this will have its own chat, this will have its own chat. Both of these have their own chat, sorry, the size, disregard the size, they're the same. But they'll have their own chat where they will go out and they will do all this research, they'll gather all the context. The same thing with this one, it'll gather all the context, and then it will feed the information back based on the summary, it will have a singular output, and it will feed that back to our main agent. Similarly, this agent will get one response at the end, and it will feed it back to our main agent here. And what that allows us to do is, first of all, it doesn't clutter our singular agent, right? The context, because it's not going out and doing all of this research and filling up its particular context window. So it's really good for keeping your specific context clean. We can offload this out to another employee. Again, the way you want to think about subagents is as if you are a CEO. If you're a CEO, you don't have the time to learn every single part of your business thoroughly, right? I mean, you should try, but it's physically you're not able to. And so what do you have? You have employees to do specialized tasks for you. And what do you get? You get the most important information that's relevant to you. And that's the exact same model that you have with Claude deploying subagents. It offloads a lot of the compute, so it doesn't have to keep it in its working memory. It keeps what's important. It keeps the delegation in mind and the synthesization of the information that it gets back. That's its responsibility. So, okay, now that the agents have just come back, we can take a look and see what it said. The bleeding edge agrees, the calendar widget is already your differentiator, blah, blah, blah. Both agents flagged independently. Rest of the site is generic calendar templates. Okay, reference to this, one signature, what's pattern, why it's now over, red as a template, class morphism stacks, blah, blah, blah. And ranked by ROI, replace the 3 what I do with live venture dashboard. Add a now page, now.com convention. Both agents independently causes the most DM'd about section. Interesting. Sites with a /now page. Also, I didn't even know about that, so that's very interesting. Demote the contact form, editorial type pass, motion packet status. And so now we can ask, if I wanted to go through, can you create a plan loop to implement this? So we did the research. We could have done a brainstorm, but the brainstorm we already kind of took care of. So now we want to just run a plan loop. And you can see it will invoke the plan loop skill. It will then run through a plan loop, and it will come up with a concrete plan that we can use to actually implement this. Now, coming back to the plan that it drafted, you can see that it spun up 2 more agents again. It is running a agent right now. It's running multiple agents. In fact, it's running a learning research spec flow agent, architecture review, code simplicity. It'll run through this process. Then I'll run through a workflows work. Then I'll run through, a review. I'll run through a compound engineering compound, and then I'll run through a front-end validate. So all of these are commands that are built into the compound engineering methodology that I will highly recommend that you adhere to in terms of actually building out a product. Now, the next video that I'll have will actually walk you through these specific things because these take a while to actually build out. So we're finally done the plan loop. Let's now go ahead and actually execute the plan. So what you will want to do, of course, is actually read the plan itself. What is the plan that we have come up with? You can see the title is there. When was it created? When was it revised, if ever? The particular plan hash, this is simply the commit ID on GitHub. And then the context, external frontier agent, both part of the same diagnosis, the calendar, which is a genuine differentiator, blah, 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 plan revision history, rest simplification, differentiate from generic founder templates, non-goals, architectural decisions, right? All of this is there, and you ideally read them and try to understand them if wanted. But even if you don't, the methodology itself is extremely powerful in that it'll be able to keep track of a lot of these things for you. Anyways, it has 2 PRs. A pull request is simply 2 batches of codes you can think about, around 400 to 500 lines of code, net line of code, so exactly. So each one is around, I guess, 350, 375 lines of code. Edge cases, it will take care of a lot of these things that are more technical. As long as you have everything connected, this should work. And you can say, let's copy this, paste it, press enter. And this is essentially what this command is doing is the compound engineering. There's a workflows work skill that gets run. And in that skill, it takes this plan as an argument, or it takes this plan as context. And again, this is open source, so you'll be able to take a look at the actual workflows work command, but essentially it tells it to follow this to a T. And after this is done, if you remember the compound engineering methodology, the next step is to now run the reviewer and then the compound step after that. So the review gate will review the actual code itself, and the review gate has built into it an actual front end pass. So we'll take a look at the deployed site and see if everything looks good. And then we can either go ahead with the deploy, or we can go ahead with the compound step after that. So I'll be back once this is done. What you will see here, the branches, these are the branches. So right now we're on the main branch and we'd be pushing into the main branch. You'll see as soon as we create an actual branch for, we have 2 PRs. So we have 2 different sections of codes, 2 sections of commits that we have to make. As soon as we make one, you will see it change right here. It will change from main to the actual name of the branch. And then that will raise a PR. Raising a PR again is just asking to pull those changes into the main branch. Okay, so as you can see, it's created the PRs as needed, right? And it gives us the option now to merge these in if need be, but it will automatically run it, and it will run the front end validate, right? Automatically. So what this front end validate command does is it will now open it in the background in its own browser. The agent will then take screenshots of it and verify it according to what it believes it should look like based on the description laid out in the plan. So it will verify it, and once it's done that, then it will come back to us. If it finds any issues in it, then it will automatically change it and update it, then run it, then review it again, and then continue on. Okay, so we can see that it's said that it's finally completed. So if we go to the site, then you can actually see when the last pushes were to these things, how many times it's been starred. A very basic website, extremely basic. Again, we haven't really used any of the component libraries. I'll drop a video down below that's been made by someone else. It's extremely good. It's this particular video. It goes a little bit more into depth about using Claude Design and motionsite.ai. This is pretty nice. It's pretty fancy. Honestly, though, in my experience, people don't care that much about websites being that fancy. You can take certain things from here, but they care more about it being personalized and being easy for people to actually understand. And so, again, this is something that's very basic, but you can see the power of the compound engineering methodology here because it was able to work through everything and get it to work as we wanted it to. One thing I wanted to touch on was API keys. I glossed over it previously. API keys are essentially passwords. You can think about passwords to particular websites or particular data stores. So imagine you go to a hotel. When you go to a hotel, there's a bunch of rooms, right? In this analogy, each room would contain data. That's the way I wanted you to think about it. It's another service that you have access to. So let's say one of them is Gmail, one of them is Google Calendar, one of them could be Vercel, one of them could be Asana or Jira. You can think about a plethora of different services that you use. The data for that would be a particular room. Now, what does an API key do? An API key is a key card for that particular room, right? So it's a key card for a particular service. For example, Vercel, Github, right? All of these platforms, you can get API keys, and most software services, you'll be able to generate API keys. And I'll walk you through how to do that on Vercel, for example. That's how I've connected my Vercel as well. Or let's say you want to, so you can have on GitHub, you can have also Bavimail. So I use Bavimail to send out emails across my startups to people. And even just internally, I have daily emails that I send myself across the news, across competitors. And I can send it to my teammates, I can send it to investors. And the way that you do this is very simple. You'd simply, on any website, you can ask Claude how to create an API key. If I go to bavimail.com, start building, there's a free tier here. You can simply click on API keys, right? Let's say create a key. I call it Claude Code tutorial, create a key. Now I will rotate this key, so even if you see it, it's not a big problem. I can copy this key, I can drop it into a new session, and I can simply tell Claude, hey Claude, this is a Bavimail API key. Can you use this to authenticate and take a look at my domains and aliases, and then send a sample email to adam@bavlio.com? And you can imagine one of the key functionalities of this is saving the API key in a folder and then, or in a skill, and then that skill now has access to that particular API key, and it can then go ahead and send emails. If I had a send email skill, right? So again, it's saying here that I pasted it directly, but don't worry, I will rotate it as soon as we're done. And it should be able to pull all of the information that lives here, all of our inbox, our identities, analytics, etc. All of this will be able to be pulled now by Claude. And so API keys are absolutely crucial because they allow you to call APIs, right? They allow you to call and access data from different buckets into Claude. Okay, so we see that now Bavimail is done, right? The plan is approved. It found the API, it found the auth header, ... It's ready to send. Awesome. Let's send the email. And just like that, the good thing with Bavimail is that we have 5,000 free emails a month on the free tier. So if you're starting out, if you're a founder and you want to take care of any email sending, if you want to do email sending for sign up, sign in, any notifications, if you want to send out newsletters, if you want to set up anything at all, email based, that's exactly what Bavimail is for. And you can see how easy it is. You don't even need to understand how Bavimail works. You just need to feed Claude Code an API key, and then it will work. So let's see, it says, you go back to Bavimail, it says one was delivered. Let's take a look at my email and actually see if that was delivered. Awesome. You can see. Perfect. We just got an email delivered. So that's extremely powerful. BavEmail does that. We can even do that via Bavlio. So Bavlio actually takes care of campaigns. You go to bavlio.com. This is built on top of BavEmail, and what Bavlio allows you to do is personalize messages, set up email campaigns, find leads, right? That's number one, is actually find the people you want to reach out to, personalize the message, find their email addresses, verify their email addresses, and actually reach out to them. So I use Bavlio, I use BavEmail daily, and the pricing is actually cheaper than anything else. Again, sorry, self-plug. But again, it's cheaper if you're someone who's a founder, you want to reach out to other people, then our pricing is extremely cheap across the board. And we have a API that you can simply integrate in with. You just generate an API key on Bavlio, same way you do with BavEmail, and it makes outreach extremely useful. And I can do it either via Bavlio itself. The way I've built Bavlio is it's very easy. I can just ask it things. Here it's agentic driven. You can see email finding, email personalization, managing your leads, managing campaign. You can even connect your LinkedIn profile to Bavlio. And if you want to do what I use Bavlio for LinkedIn is every single day, it will send out 30 connection requests, follow up with them. You can do multi-channel sequences, so reach out to someone on LinkedIn, then email, LinkedIn email. If you've been on the receiving end of this, you know that it is actually quite powerful, and your response rates as a business are extremely high doing this as well. We natively scrape Google Maps. We can scrape LinkedIn profiles. We do a lot of things on Bavlio. And so it's the one tool that when I was starting out, I wanted. And so I just built it myself, and I've built it using Claude Code. So everything that I've talked about in this tutorial is present because you can see it, and you can use it using Bavlio as well. You can see it in motion, just how powerful the compound engineering methodology really is. Another really great feature of Claude Desktop is Cowork. So Claude Cowork is a new feature that's been added, which essentially gives Claude access to your computer. So I know this sounds a little bit as if it can be an invasion of privacy, and it definitely can be, so you have to be mindful. That's why I've turned off any features personally to go through and use any of my data for training on Anthropic. However, if you look on the upside, then you can really use this to enhance your computer. The main thing that I use it for is if I want to clean up any files, if there's any screenshots that I know I don't need, or if I just want to rework things, if I want to move things around on my computer, if I want to just rearrange things, it's very, very important. If I want to bucket things together, etc., you can go to Claude Cowork and you can ask it, hey, I want to organize my downloads folder. Can we go about doing this? I want to get rid of any extraneous files that are redundant and are just eating up memory. Right, and then here I can give it access. So let's say I give it access to Atom, and then it will go ahead and take a look at this. You can also schedule things. So you can schedule tasks to run while your computer is awake. My computer, I always keep it awake. And you can set up certain briefings or descriptions of it and have that run as well. You can set up the model, etc. I don't really use this. I just route it through Telegram. So I get a message, but you can imagine setting something like this up where every single morning you wake up and you get messages on what you've worked on, etc. Very similar to the routines actually, but you can imagine that this is for your specific files on your computer. Another thing is that the recents here are different than if I went to Claude, right? These sessions here are separate than what exists in Claude Cowork. Okay, let's go back to this, and it can see my downloads folder now. And what are some things that it can delete? Awesome, all of these things are dual. So what categories? Sure, we can get rid of installer files, other installer, number duplicate files, log files. Sure, let's get rid of all of those. Keep newest, sure, delete oldest. Let's do this. And so running this periodically, you can even schedule this particular thing to run maybe once a month. You can schedule a task. You could set up the frequency. I guess weekly is the longest you can do, but even setting up something weekly to run where it just cleans up your desktop, it's a headache taken off of you. The more you can delegate out to different agents to do the work for you, the more efficient you can have your day-to-day processes. Coming back to philosophy for a second, you need to remember that AI is your best teacher. Best teacher. For 99% of scenarios, the reason is because it never gets tired. It never gets tired. It's always polite. It will always answer what you're saying. It meets you at your level. A lot of times if you talk to professors, they have a very hard time understanding the issues that you have because they have all of that knowledge in their minds. AI does too, but it's very good at meeting you at your level, at understanding and giving you multiple analogies, examples, so that you can connect it back to things that you have an idea of. The other thing is it's personalized, right? We saw this via the Claude.md, we saw this via the memory.md. And that's not it. Once you download the compound engineering methodology, then it actually compounds over time. There's more context that we are gathering. As time goes on, it gets better and better and better, and it can personalize it. The specific problem that you have, it can tailor it to that, to your specific use case. Let's say after all the explanation that I've done today, there's still certain things that you're unsure about, right? You're still not sure how API work or how API keys work, or you don't know how the front end and what a back end is. All of these things, you can simply ask AI. If there's particular use cases, skills, let's say, MCPs, plugins, anything here that is ambiguous, you can simply ask AI. And that's why I said at the start, there are 3 things that you need as prerequisites, right? The main 3 prerequisites are being self-motivated. I'd probably say that's the most important. If you're self-motivated, the second is being creative / direction. So you actually know what to do. You have an imagination, you can think. And then the third is articulation. So are you able to explain what you want to build? Are you able to get the thoughts from your mind into the actual model, right? So you can see direction kind of plays into both of these. But are you able to do this? Are you able to communicate to the model well? And you can use the model to get better at all of these as well, right? You can use the model to teach you how to become more self-motivated, for example. You can learn how to become more creative by trying more things. You can learn how to become more directed by analyzing your speech and asking it if there are certain words that you use, certain phrases that you use where you are more ambiguous, and can I use more directional speech? You can ask it to identify patterns in your voice that if you're using the speech to text, for example, it can pick up on. And all of these things that I'm talking about are things that I have within my own Claude Code. That's why I have improved my articulation from where it was. Again, I'm not a master, but it gives me a breakdown every single week of how well I've done, how many fillers have I used, all of these things, what phrases am I using certain things that I said I wouldn't be, am I working optimally, right? How am I dividing my time, etc. You can really use it as a business coach. You can use it as anything as long as you have the right context, because at the end of the day, what is AI? AI in the state that it is today is its intelligence commoditized. That's what it is. You're commoditizing intelligence, and your job is to provide it the right context. If it boils down to anything, it's providing the right context, and your ability to do that will determine how well you're able to leverage AI. Honestly, the main thing I really want you to walk away from this video is this. I do not write any code anymore, and I have not opened a code editor and actually read code in months. I describe what I want, the agents do the work, and I just review whatever they ship. And that is the entire skill, and it is something that anyone can learn. If you have stuck this far, then you're the type of person who can actually focus, and you genuinely care about learning. And that is the exact type of person that we have in our community. So if you want to meet others who are on the same path, some of whom are further along and some of who are just getting started, come and hang out with us. It's called Adam's Builder Club, and the link is in the description, and it's completely free to join. Every week I hop on a call with everyone in there, and whatever you're working on, you bring it to the call and we'll figure it out together. So this was episode 1 of a multi-part series. Everything that we covered today was the foundation. It was the setup, the mental model, and it's how Claude actually works under the hood, and it's the groundwork for what is coming next. In this next episode, I'm going to go much deeper. I'm going to walk you through the personal context engine that I've built for myself. It captures everything I see on my laptop and everything I say throughout the day, and it feeds all of that back into my agents as context. So my agents do not just know how to code, they know what I am working on, who I am talking to, what I decided last Tuesday, and what I told myself I would build next. All right, so that's it for this one. I'll see you in episode 2.